Hi guys, I'm just going to talk you through this recent video of myself playing my Tuesday training partner, Colin. In this video you'll notice that I'm standing up to the table almost exclusively. The reason for that is basically after coming back from the Australian Open this year, my legs by about day 3 of the Aussie Open were shot, very sore, joints and muscles a little bit, but basically all my joints and ankles and knees and back were very sore from it. And in the end, after about day 3, I was in a fair bit of pain, and it took me about a week to actually get over it afterwards. So I've come to the conclusion that basically playing the long range defending style could be quite difficult next year. Especially if I'm going to the veterans, where a lot of the games are quite a bit longer, because at the Australian Open some of the games are reasonably short, because you're playing some very good players who hit the ball very hard, very fast, and you get some short rallies, therefore some short games. Whereas at the Australian veterans, there's probably going to be a lot of very long games, not to mention the addition of an extra couple of doubles in each match. So the chances are probably pretty good that I wouldn't be able to play at a decent level the whole way through, just because I'm so sore and in a fair bit of pain. So looking to get over that, I'm thinking of basically coming back up to the table, standing up to the table, which will be interesting and quite useful for us actually, because what you'll be probably seeing over the next few months is how I handle the style close up to the table, and really I guess rather than just me talking about it and using it only against lower level players, you're now going to see me use it against the better players in WA and see how that goes. Again, Colin's one of the top WA players. He's actually a defender but with a very good forehand attack. In the weeks to come, say this Sunday, I've got another tournament playing a variety of other top players, different attackers and so on. So you'll see me, I'll put up some video of some of the different styles that I'm coming up against. But yeah, in this particular video you're seeing me play one of the top defenders in WA who also has a good hit, and you'll see how I go standing up close, and I'll just talk you through that. Having said all that, we'll get into the match. I'll just note that in this particular game against Colin, I'm still using my Tackiness Chop 1.1mm on the forehand, the Stiga Destroyer on the backhand, on the Matsushita Pro Special Blade. Against some of the other players, this is a bit too slow. It's not too bad against a defender, but against other attacking players, it's a little bit slow. So I'll be using in future some faster rubber on the forehand to get a bit more power and penetration. But at the moment it is still a fairly slow rubber. Against a defender, not so important. So again, looking here, you can see straight away that I'm now very much closer to the table than what I used to be. I'm really trying not to give up ground at all, and trying instead to basically keep the pace to a level that I like by using the long pips, varying the pace with the long pips, and then picking off loose balls. It's a little bit easier against someone like a defender like Colin, who'll give you some ground and go away from the table and give you some extra time to play. Although he does possess a very good attack, it's a little bit more difficult sometimes to play this style against a good aggressive player who's hitting off both wings, and we'll see examples of that to come. You'll also see in this video today I'm going to highlight a few of the chop blocks that I used during the match. I'll do some proper video of that later, but I also just wanted to highlight it in practice and show you in actual game how it works. And there's you'll see one coming up in this rally, and then I'll slow-mo it. Okay, so going to the slow-mo here, you can see Colin again, very good serves, low over the net, just enough for me to roll heavy with the pips using his counter attack, and I'm just quite a little off balance, so I'm not trying to do anything major at all with that block, just really putting it back on the table and making Colin hit another ball without trying to do anything fancy. And managed to take that particular game. Now these are just, they're not necessarily games in a row, because there's some from me from the other side which I haven't included. You will see one from the other side later which I'll include to show some footwork. So here again, here's another slow motion video of the chop block, rolling there with the long pips. Colin comes back and just really easily putting the bat in the way, basically. Nothing too forcing, and then I missed the next ball. But the idea behind this chop block is just to get the ball on the table and make him play another ball, vary the pace, and again there, and try and just break up his rhythm and his timing. So not a great serve. Colin gets in the attack, I go defensive, and this time Colin makes very good position, and I'm waiting on that backhand side, and he sees that and goes the other way, and I get caught because I'm not in a neutral position. I was actually in a backhand position, and served me right. And here's a good example of what I think a lot of the players in the coaching group could take notice of in the stance and the use of this forehand to allow you to open up your game and give you more options. Now, I'm not saying by any means that I have the world's greatest forehand. My technique isn't perfect. It certainly could use still a little bit of improvement. But what you're seeing here is I'm going to maybe a little bit too square a stance. I'd rather be a little bit more forehand orientated, but I'm trying to get in that forehand stance and play the ball depending on which side it goes from. And what that does is it basically keeps my options open and allows me then to use the twiddling depending on when the opponent puts the ball on either side. So I'm not trying to cover everything with my backhand. Instead, I'm using both sides of the bat to give me maximum court coverage without having to use a lot of extra footwork to cover the whole table. I'm not cutting out my forehand options by standing in a heavy backhand stance. And you'll notice that my backhand really doesn't suffer. There's no big shoulder turn on the backhand. There's no need to get a big shoulder turn going. So I don't have to really stand in a heavy backhand stance to play my backhand. So what's happening here, this is just what I mean when I'm talking to some of the players in my player analysis, is that by staying in this forehand or mainly forehand stance, I can still play quite perfectly adequate backhands without giving up the ability to hit a forehand and pick off a forehand when it comes. And I still think that's an important technique to get, and isn't that hard to learn. Here I've just included the point of view from the other side, and the reason why I've done this is I just want you guys to be able to get a good look at my feet position as we're playing the points. Now, because we're a little bit at the side, as you can see, the left-hand side of the table is a little bit further from the camera from the right. So take that into account when you're watching my feet position. But what you'll notice here is that I'm really, rather than serving and going straight into that backhand position that a lot of us coaching group members are using, I'm serving and I'm trying to go into a forehand position. And I can still play from that forehand position. I can still play a perfectly fine forehand, a fine backhand without any dramas. But what's different in terms of my going close up to the table to some of the coaching group members is that what I'm looking for here is I'm not exclusively looking for a forehand. I'm basically looking for whichever side I've twiddled my bat to have the inverted rubber. But I don't have to, if I've twiddled to go, say, to put the inverted rubber on my backhand, I'm not going to go to a big backhand stance because I don't have time close up to the table. So I stay in a slightly, or what I'm looking for is to stay in a slightly forehand stance, but make my focus on attacking whichever side has the inverted side. I will occasionally attack with the pip side just to break up the game, and if I am attacked, I will chop block with the pips. Occasionally I'll attempt to roll it back, And if he attacks to my smooth side, to my inverted side, I'll just go with generally just a basic block and put the ball back on the table, hopefully somewhere awkward. Now, you don't see too many examples of that because Colin, being a good defender, is defending a lot and then trying to come in and pick me off. But again, you can see from this stance, I'm not going to a heavy backhand stance at all. You might say I'm just slightly in a forehand stance. It's not hurting my backhand in any way. I'm not having to go over way over to the forehand side of the table to play all my backhands. And what that means is it keeps me in basically an easy neutral position where I'm covering the whole court fairly easily. I'm not stuck on one side or the other. And those are the benefits that you get. I haven't played a lot of close up to the table play against good players. Usually I do it against people of a lower level. But even against a good player here like Colin, what's happening is I'm simply trying to maximise my game here, so that if it goes to the forehand side, I'm ready to hit a forehand. If it comes to my backhand side, if he's attacking to my backhand side, I'll go with a chop block. If he pushes to my backhand side, I'll either twiddle and attack off the backhand, or I will roll perhaps with the pips, or occasionally push and just try and get a spinny forehand, a spinny backhand, turning the backspin of my opponent into topspin push. And what I'm doing is, by keeping my stance neutral, I'm really able to attack off either wing. And you should see that evidence in these games against Colin. You won't see me hopefully get caught too often. I'm able to freely open my attack on either side when Colin gives me the opportunity, because I'm not committed to one side or the other. My footwork is basically neutral and allowing me to execute. And this is what I've got in mind for those of you out there who are willing to sort of say, okay, look, let's give this forehand stance a try. This is the idea, and I'm not saying I'm executing it perfectly, but that's what I'm working towards, is this ability to basically stay up to the table, vary the ball, take advantage of any opportunities that come to either side, and don't get caught stuck over one side or the other. Don't allow yourself to get pinned down by your opponent, because if Colin tries to tie me down to the backhand, I can play variations with my long pips, I can twiddle and go off my backhand. If I play a backhand and he then swaps to my forehand, because I've kept my stance neutral, I don't get caught and have to play defensively on my backhand. You will see me do it now and again, and it's a leftover. You'll see me play a backhand, Colin will switch to the forehand, and I'll play a very upright looking stroke block with either the inverted or the pips. And that's usually where I've accidentally got myself into a backhand stance and committed to a backhand stance, and the ball's come back to my forehand before I'm ready. And I then end up having to play a very defensive shot off the forehand side where I'm caught. And there will be, I think there's a couple of examples in slow-mo later on down the track, and we'll see that. And that's just a throwback to bad footwork on my part. Now, could I do all this in a backhand stance? There's a good example of it. And I think we'll see a slow-mo here of it. And you'll see me basically get caught on that forehand because I'm on my backhand side. So he's serving, I've stepped in on the forehand, and I'm very much backhand stance there, still in a backhand stance, and yeah. So I basically got caught from the short forehand ball, didn't really recover to a neutral stance, and Colin took advantage of that by hitting back to my forehand. And I was fortunate to get out of the situation. I didn't try and do too much and got away with it. And that awkwardness on that forehand was simply caused by my footwork. Lesser quality footwork. I didn't recover properly, and I got caught. And it shows straight away in the awkwardness of the stroke. Very evident. And when I'm watching other players, when I'm watching other coaching group members, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for that highlights to me that usually there's a problem in the footwork if there's suddenly an awkward looking stroke. And again, another slow motion. I'm spinning with the inverted and staying, haven't twiddled back. Little push. Colin's reading that, and I'm now rolling with the pips. Colin sees it and takes advantage of the counter attack. I've twiddled now, and I just dead bat the block, very short on the table, and that makes it hard for him to attack. And again, I'm not trying to do anything radical with that chop block, just drop it back short and tight. And there's a lucky example, I think, a little bit of me getting away with it, where I've served badly, recovered to my backhand, come over on that playing elbow to play backhand, and look how upright I am. And I've been kind of lucky that Colin hasn't punished me a bit further with that one. I got away with it there. But again, you can see me make that awkward looking backhand block, stay in a backhand stance, stand up, and I can't hit a decent forehand from there. I was lucky that I got a block and I got away with it. So it's actually quite interesting. It's a good example here because my footwork is by no means perfect. So what you can see quite often is you can actually see the difference between when I do things correctly versus when I do things not quite right. And when I do things correctly and recover to a forehand stance and move properly, the strokes stay smooth, I stay low, I can hit a backhand and then come around and hit a forehand. When I do things a little bit wrong and I get stuck in that backhand stance a little bit, stand upright a little bit, you'll notice that my forehand becomes, I lose the ability to hit a decent forehand topspin, and I end up blocking a lot on the forehand side with a very square stance and open playing arm. And that's it's easy to see in hindsight and on the video. And just a nice little chop block there, moving around and taking advantage now of the forehand, and just missing, but hey, that's you get that sometimes. And there's another good example of me doing getting caught on that forehand side. So it does happen. It happens to the best of us. Happens a lot to the worst, a lot more to the worst of us, but certainly can happen. But it's a very different game playing up close to the table compared to the long-range defending. The timing is different. In some ways it's simpler, and in some ways it's more complicated. It's certainly simpler because you know there's no decision about do I have to go back, do I stay up. You know you're going to stay up to the table. So in terms of your depth, where you're going depth-wise, the game becomes a little bit simpler because you're always staying fairly close up to the table. In terms of choosing which shot and having the time to choose the shot, it gets a little bit more difficult because you're always a little bit more, the ball's always at you quicker because you're standing right up. So that can be a little bit more difficult in terms of you don't have as much time to react and to twiddle sometimes. Having said that though, again, in some ways, you know if the ball's coming at you fast, you're basically blocking, chop blocking with either the pips or blocking with the inverted. And when the ball's pushed at you, you can roll or attack as you want. So in some ways it's a little bit simpler there. There's not that need to decide, do I go back and chop and do I come back and counter attack, or do I stay up and try and attack? You already know you're going to stay up, so those decisions are taken out. And here's a good reflex chop block, I think. Colin again serving with that nice loose grip on the handle, brings it back, catches me. I've gone back to a backhand stance, and I was lucky that he actually just hit to my backhand. And again, you can just see I really tried to do nothing. I'm stuck in a backhand stance, can't do anything with the forehand. Now I've recovered a little bit, still a bit square, but I did try and get back to my forehand stance, which meant that I had a chance to hit a forehand, and didn't do much with the serve there. So these are things that I'm going to be working on in the future, that you'll hopefully see me in the months to come improve, and hopefully I won't be getting caught with that backhand stance to a forehand stance so much. There's a couple of nice attacks there, maintaining my forehand stance, maintaining my forehand stroke. It's quite evident with me though, I guess, is that I don't have some of that upper body flexibility perhaps from the waist. I don't quite have that ability to just bend and be with my feet the wrong way around but still hit a decent forehand. If my feet are the wrong way around, I struggle to hit a decent forehand, and definitely something I'll take further note of and try and keep improving. So again, getting a decent block there. A little bit of use of the backhand serve. I like the backhand serve cutting across the playing elbow from Colin's left to his right. Gives him a different spin, gives him a different angle to work off, and gives me, having, because I have a good backhand, I quite just like the fact being in the centre of the table. Here's an example of the forehand serve. Getting the free arm out the way, I'm quite happy about that. Colin's pushing with his pips. I'm square there, and you can see my feet are so square, which means that it's very hard for me to get any power on the forehand, so I end up with a high forehand. Decent little dab. Colin takes advantage of it, and there I got caught a little bit and just tried to not do very much, just put the ball back on the table with the long pips, and again just got away with it that time. Contrast me, it's worthwhile to a certain extent contrasting my footwork and my strokes to Colin's. And what you'll see is, although don't worry too much about the scoring and who's winning, because we're both trying to make things difficult for each other, but if you look at Colin's footwork and take another look at this video and watch Colin's feet, you'll see that Colin goes into that backhand stance a lot because he wants to play the pips, he wants to play the heavy chop. So when he's chopping, he'll quite often go to that backhand stance. But you'll also notice that when he goes to play the forehand, he's very, very fast at switching out of the backhand to the forehand stance, much faster than I am. So you'll very rarely actually see him play a forehand from a backhand position. And when he does do it, he's got a little bit either more flexibility or better trained. He can turn his body to make it work better. So there he's in his backhand stance, playing backhands, committing to a backhand there. But very, very fast to get in a good forehand position when he wants to play the forehand. In contrast, I have nowhere near Colin's footwork, so I'm having to get by and being basically sneaky and trying to break up the game, break up the rhythm, and do a few other things. But Colin's a great example of just very smooth, very well trained footwork. Not right there because we're at the end of a tough day. Have a look at some of the earlier games, you'll just see some great footwork going on.